Thank you for joining us, and we'll be here for probably an hour, and there may be time for questions toward the end. But you can see that we have a lot of people here that are just dying to talk about this topic. And they are listed on the slide, which I think means intros don't need to go on too long. What I'm going to do is start with our first question. One thing I should point out is we've done a survey at Fierce Electronics about how people feel impacted by tariffs, and the results were kind of a resounding negative. These were people that were asked to comment about how tariffs affected them, and the reaction was overwhelmingly negative, 80% of our recent survey, which is still online in case anyone really loves the subject and wants to comment and hasn't felt like they could do it anonymously, which you can do. The other things that have happened are, almost too many to list. Almost every day there's a change in the tariff policy in the United States. Not for the last 10 days or so since something happened in the Middle East. And I think that's probably kind of good. But it does help people in this business maybe take a little more time to think about how they approach the topic. And all these speakers are going to talk about their own experience or their known experience. It's not speculation. We're going to just try to stay grounded in truth. So I'm going to start with the first question for Andy. And you can just explain what you are and who you are, and a little bit about how you've been affected by tariffs and how your business has been.
Great, thank you, Matt. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. And I'm Andy Doe, president of Embedded Works, actually a vendor over there. And I've been asked to kind of give a perspective on small business, how tariffs have affected us. And so one of the things that we had to, kind of pivot quickly was when the tariffs list of the countries and the different percentages came up. We have a very thriving and strong e-commerce business, so we had to quickly basically put the new tariffs on our site. One odd human behavior that we found was we tried to be transparent, so quickly we put the price, we put the new tariff, and all of a sudden we saw precipitously our online sales just dropped. We thought we were being very transparent. So we said, well, let's try something different. So what we ended up doing, we took the tariff, we put it into the main price, and then our sales went back up again. So that tells you that people don't want to know how the sausage is made, just give me the price. So that was something we had to pivot quite quickly, for the tariffs.
Tell me about your experience. You are a consultant, and you've gotten a survey of your own, I think.
Yeah, so I'm the executive director of the Reshoring Institute. We've been around for 11 years, so we've been helping companies rethink their global manufacturing strategy for a very long time. And overall, I've been in the global supply chain industry for 40 years. So I've seen a lot of stuff. I've worked all over the world, including lots of engagements in China. And I think the mood of America has really changed, and our politicians are driving a certain narrative about bringing manufacturing back to the U.S. However, I don't think it's very realistic. We're seeing an uptick certainly in interest in more sourcing of raw materials in the U.S., some rebuilding or expansion of manufacturing here. But to see a tidal wave coming back of manufacturing, no, that's not going to happen. So first of all, we don't have workers who are going to sit on plastic benches for 12 hours a day and assemble parts or at sewing machines. That's not the American worker. Secondly, our wage rates are too high. Thirdly, we don't have that much worker capability, and we have a worker shortage all across America. We don't have the infrastructure to manage that kind of manufacturing, and we don't have the electrical grid. Had a conversation with an investment banker a couple of weeks ago from New York who is in the energy sector, and he said, there just isn't enough energy in the Northeast corridor or throughout the Northeast U.S. to manage additional manufacturing, so they're struggling as is. So there's a lot of reasons why that is probably not going to happen. It's unrealistic to think that way. In the meantime, many of our clients are trying to rethink their global strategies and to avoid tariffs if they can at all possible. And so there's a lot of different strategies that are being pursued.
And your survey showed that people were not pleased.
Yeah, thanks for reminding me. We were engaged by the state of New York to interview CEOs. So we interviewed 18 CEOs all across America and asked them how they felt about the tariffs. And it was an overwhelming negative response, and mostly because of the uncertainty. So if there was a tariff in place and they could plan on it and they knew how they could plan their operations around it, that's one thing. That's not the environment we're in. We're in a kind of roller coaster environment. So yeah, it was a very negative response, and by and large, these CEOs and COOs and chief supply chain officers all said they were doing nothing. They were not moving forward. They were not investing. They were not hiring. They were stuck because of the uncertainty of the environment. In the background, they were planning what they might do in the future, but for right now, it's a temporary hold and no forward movement.
Yeah, thank you. Jimmy, you're kind of an expert in all these fields, so tell us about your experience.
Yes. Hello. I'm Jimmy Ting. I'm with Great World Customs Service. We're a licensed customs broker. We've been representing businesses to help them clear customs and manage duties and tariffs for over 4 decades. We have a lot of tech companies that we represent here in the Silicon Valley. And so this past year, with the beginning of the second Trump administration, it's fascinating to see how my personal experience with my importers is that during the first Trump administration, they were trying to wait it out, and they were trying to see what Trump was really going to do. With the second administration here, and with the tariffs that he's implemented on a stop-and-go basis, it's essentially paralyzed a lot of my importers. So when the reciprocal tariffs first were announced, a lot of importers rushed to get product in, and then they decided to wait and see what would happen. And then when Trump came to a quote-unquote agreement with China more recently, they decided to try to rush things in during this 90-day pause. But at the same time, what they've realized now, and that this is my personal opinion from talking to a lot of importers, is that the writing's very clearly on the wall. A lot of the businesses that were holdouts from trying to hold out, trying to see if there would be some sort of compromise, especially when it comes to manufacturing with China, they realized that the writing's on the wall. Pretty much every one of my importers now realize they have to have alternative sourcing besides China. So whether that's going to be Vietnam, India, Malaysia, it's going to happen. And to echo what Rosemary said, they're not trying to come back here. They are looking at other destinations, but other origins, not outside of China, but not the United States. And I would imagine that a lot of you guys are seeing that here as well. A lot of the manufacturing for your products, people are looking to try to source it elsewhere. But this type of supply chain movement takes time, right? Factories don't move overnight. But I think what we're going to see over the next few years, despite what our president insists and wants, and despite him wanting, iPhones to be made here, it's not going to happen, or it's not going to happen the way he wants it. Right?
It sounds like a 50-year proposition. Did you want to comment on this, Sanjay?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Sanjay, and I'm with A.T. Kearney, which is a management consulting firm. It's one of the big four. Really excited and honored to be with this esteemed panel. And we see, we advise the Fortune 50 companies, the boards and the CEOs and the supply chain. And I'll echo what Mary said and Jimmy said. There is a paralysis in the business, in decision paralysis, and that's why the capital is sitting on the sideline, and that's not good for the economy. The CEOs, they don't want to make decisions. They want the dust to be settled before they take next $10 billion, next $5 billion decisions. So that's one of the uncertainty with the economy. So this is, again, talking to these people. So we advise hyperscalers, Microsofts and Googles, and we advise Gaps and Walmarts and Home Depots, all these big companies, and the feedback is consistent. It's not easy to relocate, not easy to rebuild manufacturing that quickly. Yes, we can put a tariff, but it takes 4 or 5 years for a next automotive component manufacturers to come up here. You need to build the factories. It takes 1 to 2 years just to build a shell. Then you need to move in the tools, and then you need to start producing. So it's not going to happen overnight. So that's one feedback. Another is, as Jimmy said, in terms of China plus one strategy from many, and this has been in the play for a very long time. So before this, I was in U.S. Department of Commerce and participated in the industrial policy, basically bring the manufacturing back here, and deployed about $5 billion in capital from CHIPS Act. And at that time, it had started. So I was also an advisor to Bureau of Information and Security on AI chip control rules. And there was a lot of discussion with all the technology companies, how they are thinking about China and China plus one. So that's what, at least from those conversations, was that there is different innovation systems that are building. So decoupling, innovation, decoupling. So on one side, we are putting tariff, trying to build. Other side, we are restricting the export of the technology, which is probably motivating other companies to invest more in the technology, make their own systems. So the world is, essentially the technology, venture capitalism. So both two parallel worlds that at least I have seen from discussing with various investors and the companies. So we are giving rise to two different worlds. And recently there has been some change in the administration in terms of the previous thinking was that we have to control the technology. The next thinking is that if we control too much, that gives our allies or motivates our allies to look at other technology platforms. So they have started to look at Asian technology platforms. So do you want the Asian technology platform to come into the fore by restricting the technology, or you want to give the technology so that you become dominant technology stack? American technology stack becomes dominant. So that is still in play. Third is the supply chain. So we advise the global companies and their global strategy on the supply chain. Okay, you want to build a server, you want to build a laptop. What is your BOM cost? If you built it here, what are your alternative sources? So help companies with identifying. So there's a tons of tools and all that we have developed. If you want to assemble a car here versus you source the component from there, what will be your strategy? If the tariff is 10%, if the tariff is 20%, what strategy is there? So they're really excited to be here.
You're excited, they're not excited, right? Yeah, so I wanted you to give your example that you just mentioned about buying your car and the costs. Just one specific numbers example, because there are a lot of numbers that fly around under this subject and I don't want to confuse it.
So I've been lecturing and talking about tariffs and working with the clients and over the last several months, every day. So I've been doing this kind of work. And, I understand how it's affecting companies and so forth. But it really hit home last weekend. So I've been in the market for a new car for a while and test drove a whole bunch of different cars and finally decided I was going to buy an Audi. And so I went to San Jose Audi and liked the car, the model that I picked out. And the dealer said they didn't have the color combination that I wanted, blue with a light interior. But he said, well, we don't have it here on the lot, but we'll see if we can find one in the region or somewhere across America. And if we can find one, then the cost is about $46,000. And he said, however, there's one at the Port of Oakland, and we could see it on the inventory list. It's at the Port of Oakland in bonded storage. and we can import it and get it to you the next day. However, the cost will be, because of the tariffs, $58,000. The exact same car, same model, same features, colors I wanted. And so, fortunately, he found one in San Diego, and we shipped it from San Diego. It was on the lot. But that's a $12,000 difference in the price for nothing, for no additional value, just an increase in price because of the tariffs. And, you know, I'm dealing with this every day, but I'm like, what? You
Yeah.
want me to pay $12,000 more for
25%.
nothing? Yeah. And then on top of that, sales tax applies to the sale price. So in addition to paying taxes on $58,000 was additional about $1,100 on top of everything else. So, you know, I mean, the point really hit home with me. I mean, I'm thinking, wow, for nothing, for absolutely nothing, just because there's now a tariff on that imported car. So that was my example.
So Jimmy, you mentioned at the table that you have to track every day what the different tariffs are. Can you just describe how complicated that is?
So the tariffs in the, a decade ago, you could have gone to the U.S. HTS schedule website and just seen, looked up your tariff number and seen your tariff. It would have been simple, easy, right? During the first Trump administration with the Section 301 tariffs from China, it got a little bit more complicated. If you knew how to navigate that website, you can see the special section. There's a additional tariff that, if you know how to look for it, you can find it. But now, during the second administration, now you have the fentanyl tariff, the reciprocal tariff, the Section 232 steel and aluminum tariff that applies to only certain tariff products, but only on the portion of the product that's made out of steel or aluminum. And so you have to find out, okay, well, what portion of the product is steel or aluminum? But then the other portion of the product is still subject to the reciprocal tariff. There's so many exceptions going back and forth, not to mention the Section 232 tariff for auto. And there are a few more Section 232 tariffs investigations out there that you should all be expecting in the next few months. There's a Section 232 for semiconductors, which could impact a lot of you. That's probably pretty imminent in the next few months. You're going to see a Section 232 tariff on semiconductors. There's a Section 232 tariff on copper, which may affect some of your products if some of your products have copper in it.
And it's different for every country.
Well, the Section 232s are applicable to every country, so you can't escape that.
But you have to have a staff person update a spreadsheet.
But we are updating it. We're trying to update it every time there's a change, which seems to be on a weekly basis, right?
Yeah.
And the problem for us is that we're making mistakes. Every broker's making mistakes. Every importer's going crazy with this because you can't plan for this, right? A lot of these tariffs are being announced with very little, time to plan for. Like the Section 232 steel and aluminum tariff was 25%. Up until, was it June 2nd or June 3rd? And then he made his announcement that the very next day or 2 days later it would be going up to 50%. Well, how do importers plan for that? 2 days later, they could have shipments on the water, right? It's devastating to importers. And again, go to what Sanjay was saying, it leads to paralysis. Businesses just can't, what are you supposed to do, right?
Yeah. Well, you guys, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to add that in my space, what I'm seeing as one who sells electronic components and et cetera, I'm seeing a little bit of the kind of tariff hoarding, meaning that people think it may go up. So I better lock in that 10% now, kind of this whole COVID area kind of hoarding, lock in that 10%, get as much goods into the US because it may go up, right? So I'm seeing a lot of that. So it's good for some businesses who are, particularly if you're in the logistics space, what I hear, and my friends can probably confirm, is that a lot of the warehouses are being filled right now with just kind of this hoarding, locking it up in inventory to see what happens after, I think, July 9th, right? Right, something like that. And then and to Sanjay's point, we sell a variety of electronic components sourced from, country of origin China, country of origin Taiwan, et cetera. And, because of some of the concerns, fears, and some maybe rightfully so, I won't name said party, but, they said, hey, if this stuff has China inside because of the wireless communication, we won't buy it. We won't use it. So it's forcing some of the manufacturers out here, and I see some of you, to pivot and, having to switch to a non-Chinese component, even though the technology is comparable, right? And because, all things being equal, why do you want to risk that scrutiny or that being blacklisted? And, that's the basis of your product line. So there's a lot of that going on, and a lot of companies are having to pivot and do this extra engineering, extra manufacturing, extra certification to ready for the worst case scenario.
Yeah,
I
go
have
ahead.
one quick thing to add. So it also is forcing a lot of process change at a lot of companies. So in the past, a lot of my clients would simply import parts from China, and they pay the duty and didn't pay that much attention because the duties were fairly low. In today's environment, where you've got these wild duty changes and differences country to country, now companies have to break down their entire bill of material, determine what materials came from China, what materials came from Indonesia, what materials came from Germany, and that's the way they enter the goods into the U.S. to avoid paying these super high tariffs on the total value. And that kind of process change is onerous, it's difficult, it takes a long time, it's hard to get it right. Think about, somebody gave me an example today. I was on a call earlier today, and they said, those wipes, Clorox wipes or whatever that you get in the little packages, it's got a tiny little strip of aluminum.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
And that aluminum is subject to all these tariffs and different approaches and so forth. And so you have to break that out from the other product and then apply all these tariffs and these penalty tariffs and on and on and on. I mean, the environment is just chaos right now. It's really, really difficult.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, without getting into the mind of the president, what's up, what's going on. So we've already talked about how we're straining the supply chain, or not straining it, trying to work around it. And then we're, not really going to find it in the United States in every case. But makes me wonder, what are we talking about really? Is this meant to change our policy with China? Does it mean, here's the big question, is globalism dead or about to be? And I think, looks like one of you wants to answer that right away.
I can take a crack at it. I think Warren Buffett said it, that fairies, they don't pay tariffs. It's consumers who pay tariff, right? So so there is globalism, and then there's a real economical and balancing the budget. So one side, the argument is that they are selling the products in US, they are making money from US, and US should get a fair share of it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a fair argument. But when you put the tariffs, it's the consumers that are paying the tariffs. 10% more, 20% more. So it's essentially passing on a VAT, value-added tax, that Europe have on the consumers. And it is not easy to do it in US. It's not popular. You can't get it passed. But this is one way you can pass the VAT on the consumer. You can balance the budget. But it's not really helping that trade imbalance until you really create the incentives to bring the manufacturing back here. You increase the investment tax credit from 25 to 30%. The global supply chain, the way they have been ordered is because they were driven by the economy.
Yeah.
They were driven by the economic reasons. And until that fundamental issue is solved, you cannot bring the manufacturing back here. So this tariffs is not really going to change the makeup of the supply chain, except for the national security piece of the supply chain. So over there, we will, and that will be again based on the taxpayer dollars, based on the US government initiatives. That part of the supply chain, based on this discussion, yes, there is some part of the supply chain that is relocating. So there is, you can say, the globalism is, changing. Is the defense segment. That's where it is changing. Like we just talked about this wireless communication being in there. No, we don't want it in the part because it is security sensitive piece of it. And that is going to be expensive, but that's where it's changing. The other pieces of the economy, the auto, the consumers, I think the globalism is going to stay here. You can buy a toy or which is like half the prices versus over here. So that decoupling is not happening. There is going to be, certain unnatural acts where we see that, okay, this is for national strategic importance. For example, rare earth metals. Yes, this is a piece that you can put export control on gallium nitride, and you need the gallium nitride for wireless communication. Let's go make investment in gallium nitride in US. So that's where the supply chain is changing. I think the major portion of the economy, the broad cross-section of our economy is industrial, auto, consumer, defense. I don't think industrial, auto, consumer is changing. Maybe the defense is, that's where the globalism is changing.
Yeah, so 50 years of globalism, since the beginning of, it's really kind of a tech-driven globalism, sort of hard to switch overnight. I guess the timing is maybe the hard part.
It's a 50 years of supply chain, balancing act that has happened, and it's not going to change until the fundamental economics is changing. And the fundamental economics is not changing. The automotive is very cost-conscious market. Consumer is a very cost-conscious market. 25% investment tax credit is not going to solve that piece. Defense is a higher margin sector of the economy, plus it is of strategic importance. Yes, we need to make drones here. We need to make planes here. We need to make defense robotics over here. So that is the one that is, it's not a question of economics. It's a question of strategic importance to the country.
And it gets a little bit fuzzy when you talk about AI. I mean, every country wants to be first in AI, and so does the US. So I don't know if you want to hit that one, but
I think over there we are the, I would say, promoter of creating a different center of excellence in other parts of the world. When you create AI diffusion control rules and then you mark the countries with red, green, and yellow, the people who are on the yellow, they can get 10,000, 20,000, 40,000 GPUs per year. And those you need 100,000 GPUs. So that country starts to think that should we invest in our own AI technology and as a national priority, so that who knows, we're going to change from yellow to red, right? So that's where the countries becomes motivated to create their own ecosystem. So the AI race is, I think, somewhat driven by us, and we are also helping those countries to go make different type of investment than otherwise they would do.
well, that's what Jensen Huang said, right? China's just going to push ahead with AI. I mean, if we're keeping these policies in place.
Yeah, I mean, as a CEO of a public company, he has a fiduciary duty to look after his investors and make that argument. So there's a pros and cons on both sides. Like if you leave it to the private industry, they want to be able to export every kind of AI, super sensitive AI too.
And they want to hire the workers anywhere to make it.
Just to make it. So that's the private sector. So there had been a healthy balance of the motivation of the private sector and the public sector up until last 10 years or so, and the things started changing in last 10 years. How we have started approaching the industrial policy and how we have started approaching the technology itself. So that last 10 years has been change.
Well, does anybody else want to comment about, is globalism dead? Because, I mean, I don't think, I wake up every morning and ask myself, is globalism dead? But, you know, it's not the most, I mean, eggs and bacon are more important.
Well, I read this interesting article from economists, really good perspective, and no, my answer is globalization is not dead, because we forget that in trade, there's hard trade and there's soft trade. I mean, if you look at the digital stuff that we do, we kill it. We kill it in the movies, the online stuff that we do, the software, we just kill it. No country can compete with the USA for the soft tech, right? And so all those dollars that the movies and all that they're buying overseas, those dollars come back to us in our stocks, in our land. And so, you know, they kind of roundabout. So, you know, globalization is a good thing, and I know, you know, and I believe in fairness. I mean, fairness in business, fairness in trade. And so, you know, if what we're trying to do, it seems on the surface, but I think if you dig a little bit deeper, we're still winning. We're still winning in a big way. And so, you know, I think globalization, so long as the internet is still around, I think globalization is going to stay.
Yeah, it's a broad, I mean, it's way too broad a question, I realize, but yeah.
Globalization is not dead. But, you know, as a business environment, it changes over time. And we see this. I'm just considering your lifetime, you know, we went from looking up things in books and so forth to the internet. We went to offshoring. We came back to reshoring. Now we're looking at kind of a reorganization of the global politics. I mean, it's a constant change. We're on a pathway of change. We're not going back to 1960. You know, manufacturing doesn't look like it did in 1960. I mean, if you go to any high-tech manufacturing plant, you know, it's a clean room and people walking around using computers and moving inventory that way. No, the world is changing. It's moving forward. And we are a globalized world now. And I think we're just seeing a shift. And we got to look at it as the horizon is shifting a little. There's some storms out there and there's some sunshine out there. But to say globalization is dead is just kind of ridiculous.
Did you want?
Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly. So, you know, I travel internationally on business every year, right? Go to China every year, at least once a year. I was just in Vietnam last November. I do encourage people to look at, and it's hard here sometimes in America, we're a little insulated, right? But if you travel out to these other countries and you see, right, what, not just China, but Vietnam, India, if you see what they are today compared to what they were 30, 40, 50 years ago, how far they've come. And this is something I think a lot of Americans who don't get out there have no realization of what, you know, how far they've come and how advanced they've become. I mean, this is not the same world we were in 1960, as Rosemary was saying. And if we try to ignore that, if we try to believe that, hey, you know, we're still, you know, we can do this all ourselves, and we don't need, you know, that India is the same that they were in 1960, or China is the same that, you know, it's the same China that was there in 1980. You know, we're ignoring the reality, right? The reality is they've come very far, and we need to work together. I mean, globalization is definitely not dead.
Just add a perspective here. It feels like part of the administration's attempt is, a little part of it is to say, let's really create some fairness with China. Because there are US tech companies over the years that I've reported on who've complained about theft of IP and unfair trade. Remember when China came into the WTO, they signed agreements that said that we won't prop up this industry at above a certain level, and those levels are, you know, they're always changed all the time. So, you know, there are at least a couple areas where maybe, you know, we don't know how Howard Lutnick is going to deal with all that, or the Treasury Secretary. But, you know, I guess if I was going to speak on behalf of the administration, I would point out that might be an outside benefit of of getting people to the table. But we really don't even know the terms of the deal that were recently announced by the president regarding China.
There hasn't been any formal announcement. All it has been is everything is informal, right? So everyone heard a few weeks ago that there was some sort of news. There's nothing posted on the White House website. There's no proclamation. There's no executive order. Everything is just pure speculation right now, right? And so
It's just one X statement that he put on June 11th, right? Yeah, that's, okay. I wanted to check with you.
Yeah, I think the small amount of understanding there is in this administration is stunning. I mean, there really is very little understanding of what a real global supply chain looks like, what the components are, who the people are that are working in global supply chains around the world, and how that might translate. Now, you know, I run the Reshoring Institute. We're trying to help companies come back, or at least think about the potential for coming back to the U.S. But you gotta include reality in that analysis. And, you know, I think it would be wonderful if this administration depended on people that were knowledgeable and had experience to advise them and help them guide the policy, but that's not the case. Howard Lutnick, for example, you know, he's the Secretary of Commerce, and he was a guy on Wall Street doing finance in the past. I mean, he doesn't have that kind of thorough background in commerce that you would expect to really set policy and move forward. So I think that's why we're seeing so much chaos, is because there's no focal point or going forward.
Well, Rosemary, I'd like to add that I think one of the reasons that there's a lot of chaos is that I think there's a lot of confusion and maybe some schizophrenia about what our ultimate goals are as a country, right? Is our ultimate goal here to compete with China, right? Is that it, or is our ultimate goal here? Because if that was it, then why are we punishing all our potential allies, right? Why do we have these tariffs on India, Vietnam, potential allies, right? If we wanted to create, like, why did Trump move away from the Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership the first time around during his first administration, right? Like, in retrospect, if that is our goal, if our goal is to compete with China, then we should be forming stronger strategic relationships with our other Asian, Southeast Asian partners. Again, India, Malaysia, Vietnam, all these countries should be our partners. And yet here we are trying to negotiate deals with them to try to extract, you know, more concessions from them, right? And that's the whole July 8th, you know, issue right now. Like, I can't imagine us having more tariffs on Vietnam than we do on China, right? But on July 8th, if there is no agreement, the tariffs for Vietnam are going to jump up to 46%, right? That's just the reciprocal tariff, right? So, I mean, and what, China's still at 10% reciprocal tariff, right? I mean, it doesn't make sense, right? It just doesn't make sense.
They have the 20% fentanyl, right?
And
sorry, it adds up. I don't want to confuse people. If you don't mind, I'll jump over to another somewhat different topic. The U.S. Senate and House passed the CHIPS Act under the Biden administration, and that was to prop up manufacturing for semiconductors in the U.S. primarily. $52 billion reduced by money for R&D to about $39 billion, and of that $39 billion, something like $4 billion was spent before Trump took office. Intel has received $2 billion out of $8 billion, and you know, Howard Lutnick has said that he's going to look at every contract and reevaluate what's in the contract. Anyway, my only point is, what does that say about policy? I mean, how much should government subsidize manufacturing? Is this really a move with tariffs to find another way instead of a, you know, incentive, a reward? It's a stick. You know, you're going to get hit with the tariff instead of getting the gift from the government. Any thoughts about that, Sanjay?
Sure. I mean, first of all, this was, I think, from my point of view, I was a senior director in the program and reported to Chief Investment Officer, and who reported to previous Secretary of Commerce, Gina Raimondo. The program was very successful, close to 900 proposals, came in the program for funding. As you said, 39 billion was the amount. So there was a lot of interest in the program, and from the things that we haven't manufactured here before. For example, a wafer. I think the audience over here know a bare wafer, a raw wafer. We haven't seen manufacturing of a raw wafer, a 300 millimeter raw wafer in last 30 years. No company came in US and they did not want to do the raw wafers. So first time in 30 years, we have a wafer factory going up. And so I led that deal. And I saw that across the spectrum, the semiconductor value chain is pretty integrated. What I saw was, across the spectrum from the highest end, like TSMC, all the way to the equipment company, there was so much interest to come into the US, set up the manufacturing, and that brought in at that time, about $400 billion in FDI. So it's a return of 10x. If you think of ROI, it's a 10x ROI. So it was very, very, I would say, successful program and a great execution of the industrial policy. And the reason these companies wanted to come here, because we have the strongest R&D over here. We have the largest customers over here for the semiconductors. So these companies were excited to come here. Plus, we were giving them the incentives now to come over here. Now you can flip that scheme and say, I don't need to give incentives. I am the largest market over here. And the companies, I can tell them that we're going to put tariffs. If you want to sell here, come and manufacture here. Why should I spend, right? So you could get away with that in some cases. And we have seen the announcements. There is a $100 billion announcement from an Asian company after the new administration came in. And recently I went to the opening of Global Wafers in Texas. They announced another $5 billion in the manufacturing. A memory company has announced another $100 billion in manufacturing. So we can make an argument that we don't have to, incentivize. Companies are naturally incentivized. But this doesn't really help the long tail of the supply chain. On the top end, we have 50 to 60% margins. On the tail end, we don't have enough margins. Those companies, we cannot bring them here just easily by the stick. And by the stick, you can make up to a certain extent motivation, but they won't do more than what they need to do over here, right? And when the secretary says that they are going to look at every deal with a new angle, and again there's a paralysis in the companies about, hey, previous administration negotiated, every big deal was complicated to negotiate. Both sides were really savvy negotiators from both sides, right? So these deals were reached with a hard work of 1 to 1.5 years, most of the large deals. And we can take a real look at it and try to make something better out of it. I doubt what those companies wanted to do. They will do more than that with this. And those things are, a binding contract between U.S. government and those companies. So there is a faith of U.S. government, in good faith negotiation those companies did. And now when we go and change that, okay, no, we are going to renegotiate, that really leaves a bad taste in the mouth of these $1 trillion of companies. And yes, as a supplier, supplier will do the business as long as, they don't have an option. Once they have an option, they will go somewhere else. They will remember this behavior, right? So I think the team that over there did an incredible job in landing these things and worked, not just the money. Every deal, every major deal, the team helped more than just the deal.
Yeah.
Bringing them the customers, bringing them the suppliers, working up and down, much more above and beyond the roles they had. And so this is not good for the ecosystem, not good for the companies. Now there is an announcement on the CapEx, but what's the time horizon? 10 years or 20 years? How realistic these capex are once they are going. And there is some open letters from some of the large Asian manufacturer who is the sole provider. So the first, they expanded, they made an announcement. Recently, they released an open letter to the administration that this is the problems with the policy. So we are really confusing the ecosystem. We are confusing these companies that what do we want them to do.
Yeah.
So re-looking is good. I mean, I doubt that, I think with the great negotiator we have, we'll see how better deal we can get.
Okay, yeah. Well, maybe that's enough said on that. I've got one kind of big question for the end, and if anybody wants to ask a question, I guess we could do that from the audience. But so the question is really, what do you guys, each of you, tell somebody what to do to deal with tariffs? I mean, what do you say to them? I mean, you guys are on the phone every day with some of these people, all of you, actually. Great panel, by the way. Wow. I've learned a lot. I mean, just, who wants to go? You want to go? What do you tell them?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. I'm on the phone every day with clients, talking to them about tariffs and strategy. There's two critical things that we tell our clients all the time. Number one is to get together a cross-functional team to talk about the tariffs. So it isn't just your trade compliance people, but you need purchasing in the mix to tell you how much more expensive parts are going to cost. You need sales in the mix to tell you whether or not your clients are going to accept a higher price, like Andy had talked about. If they know there's tariffs, will they take a higher price, or will demand drop off a cliff because of it? You need finance to understand the impact to the business. You need other internal bodies or functions within your corporation to talk about this strategy. And I don't remember ever, in the 40 years I've been doing this, clients that got together that kind of broad team, with a lot of different skills and ideas to solve a problem. But that's what you need right now. And so that's the number one thing that I tell people. Secondly, is to develop alternate strategies. So you may be stuck and you're not going to do anything right now because the environment's uncertain, but you need to start planning in the background for when things either stabilize or clear up, or 3 years from now we get a new president or something. But you need plan A and plan B and plan C. Where in the world are you going to manufacture? Where should you be moving towards? What kind of ideas and variables are going to affect those decisions? So those are the two things that I think are top priority. First of all, cross-functional team. Secondly, have multiple plans in your back pocket.
I agree with Rosemary here that I can tell you since these tariff policies, everyone in my company now has HTS tattooed to their arm. We need to know HTS codes through and through. It used to be an operations thing. Now it's like sales needs to know about it, finance needs to know about it. And I think one of the things to diversify too is that you have to pivot. If you're selling a widget and that widget is country of origin China, for example, and that's your favorite partner who you had for decades, and all of a sudden that the pricing is going to be going up, you have to go to your second or third favorite part just in case, and that's one of the things that we were having to do. And I think when it comes to planning, I mean, we're a law-abiding company and we have to follow these procedures. But I can tell you that if you can work with your vendors, right, for example, and you say, hey, look, this is the law. Meet me halfway. I'll split the tariff with you, right? So if it's 10% or 35%, let's go 50-50. And they're willing to work with you, right? Because they want the business as bad as we want the business, right? Yeah. So there's negotiations that can be done until things settle out. And I've got one vendor who said, hey, would you be willing to, take this product and we'll consign it?
What do you mean?
Consignment means we hold the goods for them.
Oh.
Kind of that tariff hoarding I was telling you about, right? And these are Asian companies, and most Asian companies don't consign. You pay first, right? But they're willing to think that way because they have to in this environment, So
I'm learning a lot. I don't have a business, but
Yeah, so I've been inundated with questions from my importers asking about ways to save tariffs, ways to navigate the tariffs. And so what I would advise is definitely talk to your assuming you guys are importers. I mean, if you are importing, talk to your customs broker and spend some time about like mulling over ideas, because I'm sure you all have your own unique scenarios, right? Your own situations, right? And so talk about ways in which, are there ways, and explore opportunities to say, hey, look, do we have ways to get money back, whether it's through drawback or through first sale? There's all sorts of legal ways to try to find ways to reduce tariffs. That's legal. I really want to emphasize that, because a lot of my importers start asking questions, like giving me suggestions about things that I'm like, hey, you can't do that, right? But talk to your customs broker about finding ways to, legal ways to manage your tariffs. The other thing I'm telling my importers is, look, tariffs really are here to stay, right? So, like, I know a few
they
weeks
really
ago,
are here to stay.
yeah, that tariffs are here to stay for the next few years. I mean, because I know that there was the CIT decision that came out. I'm sure you guys heard or some of you may have heard in the news, like a few weeks ago, the Court of International Trade struck down Trump's IEEPA tariffs, so the reciprocal tariff was struck down. And a lot of people are thinking, hey, if the Supreme Court ends up ruling, and it's going to end up in the Supreme Court, maybe towards the end of the year, maybe sometime next year. But even if it gets struck down, the Trump administration has other options for tariffs, whether it's going to be Section 232, Section 301 tariffs on other countries. It's out there, or Section 122. So tariffs are here to stay for this administration. It's not going away. So importers have to be prepared for that. It's here.
Thank you for clarifying that. I think you're the last.
I'll just add to what Rosemary and Andy said. I think with our clients, when they ask, what should we do, right? So short term and long term. What do you want to do in short term? Inventory stocking, negotiate with your vendors in terms of the tariffs, and making sure that there are different types of clients. Some of their concerns are the availability of the part itself, the cycle times. And then in the long term, before you make a decision, if the next administration is going to be different and you are stuck with a $10 billion capex or $20 billion capex, and you don't want to make that decision right away. So you want to chart geopolitics of the countries and evaluate what happens in 10 years, 15 years. So it's a scenario planning, A, B, C. In 15 years, you look at the geopolitics, which countries, why. So there's different things goes in there, the historical, cultural things, alignments, geopoliticals, and the interest. And you do this scenario planning, and then you say, yes, I want to cultivate an alternate supplier in this XYZ geography. Or you look at different parts. Okay, I can substitute the part with A and B and C, and you build a variability in your supply chain. You build a tolerance in your supply chain so that you can easily shift the parts. So you want to design your solution with more relaxed things. And we saw this when there was a COVID crisis, that we were pulling the chips out of the wiper blades. We can put it in engine, right? Even if the wiper blade doesn't work, the engine works, right? We're shipping the parts, right?
Heated seats.
EDC?
Yeah, they got rid of the heated seats. So
Heated seats, exactly, right? So basically redesigning your solution for the supply chain flexibility, long-term investment on the scenario planning, which is geopolitical scenario planning. Short-term, it is your typical solution of inventory buffers and qualifying the others.
Well,
Yeah.
That's wonderful. These are so great. You guys are such experts. I really appreciate your time. We have 3 minutes. Is somebody dying to ask a question? Otherwise, you get to go out and go see some more of the booths. I don't see a hand or anything. Okay. Well, I mean, these folks will be around. I'm sure they will talk to you unless you want their social, and then they won't give you that. So thank you again. How about that?
Thank you, Matt.